Hey everyone, welcome to The Leader's Edge, your path to personal and leadership growth. I'm your host, Steve Steele, alongside my guest host today, 𝗙𝗢𝗟𝗟𝗦. And as certified speakers, coaches, and corporate facilitators, we are dedicated to bringing you powerful principles to fuel your leadership journey and personal growth. Now, whether you're an entrepreneur just starting out, a new leader taking the reins, or a seasoned pro looking to refine your skills, this show is for you. We'll dive deep into personal growth strategies to help you strengthen your mindset and leadership abilities. But before we jump in, a huge shout out to all of our amazing listeners. Thank you for joining us each and every week. We wouldn't be here without your incredible support. And 𝗙𝗢𝗟𝗟𝗦, a new thing, something exciting. We've officially launched our very own YouTube channel, The Leader's Edge. Last week, we premiered our very first episode, and moving forward, we'll be releasing a new episode each week. Replays will be available within 24 hours after the live show. Now, let's get down to business and help you unlock your full potential. 𝗙𝗢𝗟𝗟𝗦, you are here with me today. I am so excited about you. How are you doing?
Hi, Steve. It is an honor to be sitting here with you. I am doing fantastic. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. And 𝗙𝗢𝗟𝗟𝗦, I'm so excited about our guest today. This man has made an impact on my life. I know he's made a huge impact on your life. So why don't you take a minute and introduce our special guest today?
Absolutely. I would be so happy to. So, as we just mentioned, it's an honor to have you here. Someone that has no idea how much he's impacted me directly. He is the founder and CEO of Growing Leaders, an Atlanta-based nonprofit organization dedicated to developing emerging leaders. His work stems from his 20 years of serving alongside Dr. John C. Maxwell, and he has been featured in The Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, USA Today, Psychology Today, CNN Headline News, Fox Business, Newsmax TV, Fox and Friends, discussing leadership across multiple generations in the workplace. He has authored over 35 books, including Habitudes, 8 Paradoxes of Great Leadership, and the book that we'll be diving deep on today, A New Kind of Diversity. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Tim Elmore to The Leader's Edge.
Dr. Elmore is so glad to have you here today.
Thank you. Great to be with you guys.
Oh, it's amazing. Thank you so much. We greatly appreciate it. Dr. Elmore, we're going to be touching on your book today, A New Kind of Diversity. And I know that 𝗙𝗢𝗟𝗟𝗦's got a lot of questions, and I have a lot of questions. And we just want you to pour into our audience today and add value as much as you can. But we're going to be talking a lot about generational and the gaps between the generations. And so we got 3 different segments that we're going to be talking about today. In the first segment, we're going to be talking about Mind the Gap. So Dr. Elmore, the gap between the generations, who are these generations today? And can you tell us a little bit about what this book is about and really what inspired you to write it?
Yeah, good question. Well, I think that this whole idea of generational diversity has kind of been an elephant in the room. You know, one of those big things we all know is there, but we're not quite sure how to talk about it.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
We've learned to talk about ethnic diversity and gender diversity and income diversity. But there are 4 or 5 generations in almost every workplace. And we feel there's differences. We see there's differences, but we're not quite sure how to mind the gap. So that first section is really about, let's recognize this is a thing. There's that 22-year-old Generation Z member right out of college, but then you've got that 64-year-old baby boomer who way back in the 1960s was the new kid on the block, but it's been, a long time since then. So I think it was 25 years ago that I first started researching this generational thing. With Gen Xers and then millennials and now Gen Z, and now soon the Alpha generation will be entering the workforce, the ones following Gen Z. So I just am committed to help companies that are struggling a little bit with this, this challenge, this gap. Yeah. I want to turn our frustration with each other into fascination with each other. And that's the goal.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So
that's beautiful. Dr. Elmore, let me ask you, just follow up real quick. Can you tell us what the generations are I
Yeah,
mean,
sure.
it's because some of us don't even know what generation we're in.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, that's so true. Yeah. So real quick, let me start with a simple definition. A generation is simply a group of people born within a certain period of time whose shared age and experiences shape a distinct worldview. So my two kids are both millennials. We've been talking about them for a while. They're kids in the 80s and 90s, but now they're in the throes of their career. But they think differently than a boomer does, even though they were raised in our home, eating our green beans, sleeping in our bed, and so forth. My two kids are very different. So here are the generations. The oldest that might still be around is the builder generation. They grew up between 1929 and 1945. And even though they're way past retirement age, people are living longer and working longer. They might still be doing maintenance, or they might be, cut the grass, or they may own the company.
Right.
They're people that would
So
be
true.
like 80 years old and up, but they're still kicking. Okay. They're called builders because they built so much out of so little. Think about it. Great
Yes.
Depression, World War II.
Very
Yes.
true.
The baby boomers came next. So
That'd be me.
yeah,
I'm a
that's
boomer.
right. And me. So the baby boomers are called boomers because there was a boom of babies 9 months after World War II was over.
Oh yeah.
That
Yeah.
76.4 million people were born in 18 years. And that had never happened before in America.
Wow.
In fact, that affected employment and enrollment and Social Security payments and everything else. So the boomers were a big generation that kind of felt large and in charge after World War II. America just helped win a big war, and shopping malls were popping up. McDonald's was franchising. It was a big deal. After the baby boomers come Generation X. Now, Generation X is the title that stuck with this next generation, but the first title they were given was Baby Buster.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, the reason for that is sociologists started measuring them way back in the mid 60s. It's 1965 to 82. Their generation started with the introduction of the birth control pill. So the contraceptive affected birth rates, you can imagine,
Right. Yeah.
So instead of a boom, it was a bust, hence the name Baby Buster. So birth rates dropped by the millions, which affected enrollment and employment and Social Security. So in fact, in many ways, the populations are a big hill, baby boomers, a big valley, baby busters or Gen Xers, another big hill, millennials, and then a valley, Gen Z. So it's quite interesting how it affects the economy and everything else. So the generations following Gen X or baby buster would be the millennials. They're often called Gen Y, following Gen X.
Right.
Millennials are called millennials because they'll spend their entire adult life in the new millennium, the 21st century, not the 20th century.
Yes. Yes.
So
That's
they
me,
are, yes, okay, there you go.
That's 𝗙𝗢𝗟𝗦𝗪.
Yeah. Well, and Carolina, I need to apologize on behalf of all the baby boomers who threw you under the bus.
Yeah.
15 years.
We did.
okay.
We did. I admit it. We made so much fun.
True. Well, we didn't understand you. You were so
Right.
different coming in
Yeah.
with a different mindset. But I think what we failed to recognize is as the millennials grew up, the computer grew up. As the millennials grew up, the cell phone grew up. So you were the first digital generation that kind of during childhood, teenager years, you were introduced this whole new way of communicating and connecting. So anyway, largest generation in American history is no longer the baby boomers. It's the millennials. 80 million millennials.
Wow.
That's
Wow.
huge.
It
Yeah.
is.
So that's somewhere between a third and a quarter of the American population. I know this is a global broadcast, but millennials are big all over the world. I think what happened, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. I think with Gen X kind of grew up with some neglect. It was like they grew up with a garden hose and neglect, basically, is what they drank the water from the garden hose. And they had to let themselves in after school because mom and dad were both working, or a divorce had happened and maybe no one was home.
Yeah.
Well, millennials, it's like by the 80s and 90s, we said, we want to focus on our kids. So I don't know if Carolina, this is your experience, but kids' safety, kids' self-esteem, kids' status in school became all important to both the child and the parent.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that was a big
So
deal.
true.
Difference in parenting style. Okay,
Absolutely.
following millennials would be the new kids on the block, at least at work now, and that would be Generation Z. And so after Gen X comes Gen Y, after Gen Y comes Gen Z, okay? So these are young professionals, high school and middle school. So they'll be coming into the workplace for the next decade. We should be seeing them. And they're even a bigger gap between an X or a boomer, Steve, than the
Yeah.
millennials were.
Huge,
Yeah.
huge.
So I think what we're finding, I just finished a new book. I'll talk about that later, but I think what we're going to find with Gen Z is they come in with some demands
Hmm.
that a hiring manager might go, "What? What are you talking about? You don't have any experience." Or some
Oh
expectations
yeah.
maybe we think they shouldn't have. But I'm telling you, they're the future. We can either get mad or get busy. And I say we get busy. Let's learn how to connect with them and leverage them. They bring strengths that I don't have. So anyway, those are the generations that are in the
Wow.
workforce today. Yeah.
I
Beautiful. Thank
absolutely love
you.
that. So much of that resonates with me. And even if I think about my own workplace and what I have going on, because I'm experiencing that myself, I find myself sometimes falling
Yeah.
behind. I mean, in like technology or certain
Yeah.
areas. So
Oh yeah.
it's
Oh yeah.
amazing. So I have to follow up with a question, Dr. Elmore. In chapter 1 of your book, you mention that the generation gap has widened since the
Yeah.
1960s, and
Yeah.
it's making teamwork much harder. Can
Yeah.
you elaborate on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So the term generation gap was born in the 1960s when the baby boomers were the new kids on the block.
Hmm.
Life
Hmm.
magazine editor John Poppy coined the term when he saw that the older generations, that would be the builders, didn't understand the kids today. Well, back in that day, I was a child in that day. Steve, you were a child back in that
Yeah,
day.
I was. Yes,
We
sir.
had only one screen in our house, and it sat in the
Yep.
family room, and it was the television, right?
And Dr. Elmore, I was the remote control.
Oh, yes, you were the one. Yeah, that's right. Steve, go over and
Yeah,
turn the channel to NBC. That's right. Yeah.
exactly.
Three options. Three options. NBC,
Yeah,
ABC, CBS.
yeah.
So we had one screen in our house, and at least in my home, I'll just describe it. Um, we all sat around and watched I Love Lucy or the Dick Van
Hmm.
Dyke Show or the Andy Griffith Show.
Hmm.
But we all
Hmm.
sat together, laughed together, talked together. We were together.
Hmm.
Fast forward to today, we all have our own screen in our hands. And so if there are four family members, they're all on different platforms and developing an echo chamber that is completely different. You can see why the gap would be bigger. So a
Yeah.
mother and a father might understand that their teenage daughter, who's 17, has an Instagram account. They have no idea she has 6 Finsta accounts, fake Instagram,
Ooh.
or she's developed personas for herself and she's talking to God knows who, and they're scared for their daughter, but they don't know what's going on and they feel like they've lost control. But that in itself just creates these silos that even a workplace might have 4 different silos. And isn't it true? We tend to go connect with the people like us. They look
Yes.
like us, talk like us, vote like us, instead of going after the people that were different, that will require work on our part to connect with. So that's what I think is,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. That is such great information to really key in on. But Dr. Elmore, what are some of the key questions that leaders really need to ask themselves to become better at closing these
Yeah.
different generation gaps? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sure does. Well, I'm just going to tell on myself. I'm going to confess a sin. May I say that? Uh, I,
Sure.
I, this is the 45th year of my career, and I love what I get to do. I don't want to stop, but I'm a dinosaur. I mean, in terms of my age. So I have new team members coming in right out of college, and I can be put off by their ways. Maybe they're showing up 10 minutes late. Maybe they're on their phone all the time. Maybe they're leaving early. Maybe they need PTO, or you know what I'm
Hmm.
saying. It's just it,
Hmm.
by the way, that's data. That's not an old man, complaining. That's data.
Right. Right.
Um, 1 out of 5 hiring managers say, I just don't even hire Gen Z because they're so different. That's not good. That's not good. So I would say what I'm doing is I follow a little acronym that I call a leg, ALEG. It's, how we said forever, this is the leg you got to stand on if we want to,
Yes.
help people understand what they have to stand on. So ALLG. So the letter A reminds me I need to ask questions, like you just said. I need to bring some questions to the meeting, and I need to start with asking, not telling. Let's say I've got a Gen Zer and they have done something I do not understand. What I want to say is, knucklehead, what are you doing? That sort of thing.
Right.
A real
Right.
question. What the heck were you thinking is not a real question. So
Right.
we need to start with, hey, tell me what was going through your mind when you made that decision. That's really different than what I would have done. But it's a legitimate question. Isn't it true when we ask questions of others, they feel valued? When I
Yes.
go in
Very true.
telling them, it feels like it feels like a boss. In fact, it feels like a
Very true.
bully sometimes. So I
Mhm.
start with asking questions. And some of the questions, Steve and Carolina, I might pose as, tell me about your superpowers.
Mhm.
Because
Oh, yeah.
a 20-something comes in with some superpowers I do not have.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
yeah,
So true.
Carolina,
And ways to
I
connect
believe,
with them.
yeah, I believe you, Carolina, have some superpowers I do not have. And I
Definitely.
would learn from you if I sat down with you for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wait,
Yeah.
start.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Then
true.
the L in a leg is listen. It
Mhm.
does very little good to ask questions if we're not willing to put in the time and really actively listen. So when I listen, they feel heard. And by the way, that's the number one request of Gen Zers when they come into a job. I want to have a voice. I want to be heard on day one. And of course, the boss is going, no, not on day one. You need to get some experience. But they really want that. And if we'll just stop and listen, I think we earn our right to have our own voice later. But we can't
Mhm.
get a badge. We got to use our listening. So ask them they feel valued, listen they feel heard. The letter E is empathize. I had to learn, I'm going to admit this, Steve, as a fellow boomer, I had to learn to empathize with a Gen Z, I don't know, problem that they might have that I'm going, that is nothing. That's not going to win you over. So when I empathize, they feel understood. So I have learned to say things like, and it doesn't have to be this word, but I've learned to say things like, wow, I bet that made you feel awful when that happened. Or
Mhm.
no idea you went through that. See, that's communicating, especially for a male. Caroline, I think females do this better than males do by and large. You just tend to have a heart for others. I know I'm stereotyping, but I had to learn to lean in to that 22-year-old that we just hired and say, oh, I didn't realize. Now, when I do that, I'm not lost the respect of the other person. I've actually gained respect, which takes me to the letter G in a leg, which is guide. Now
Wow.
I earn my right to guide them, which is exactly what I wanted to do from the very beginning.
Yes.
But I've taken 10 or 12 minutes, and now it's coming from relationship, not title or position.
Right.
So I'll stop
Wow.
there. Yeah.
Cute. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Absolutely. That was so insightful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I had to write my own little notes and I have to continue. We're going to have to take a break now, but thank you so much for that, Dr. Elmore. We'll take a short break. And as we just heard, Dr. Elmore has shared some great insight on minding the gap with different generations. When we return, we'll dive into our second segment on how to manage the gap. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Leader's Edge. I'm Steve Steele with my guest co-host, 𝗙𝗢𝗟𝗦𝗪, and featuring our special guest today, Dr. Tim Elmore. Wow, that was some amazing insights, Dr. Elmore, on that first section we did called Mind the Gap, telling us about the different generations of who they were, the age groups that were there. And I know that in my work, and I know in 𝗙𝗢𝗟𝗦𝗪's work, we feature all generations, every single one of them.
Yeah.
But we're going to go into a new section called Managing the Gap. Now, I'm interested in this because I want to know, as a leader, I want to know how to manage these gaps. So this, the contributions that each particular one makes. So what are some of the most common factors that create discord, I guess, between the generations in the workplace, like my generation and maybe a younger Gen Z generation?
Yeah. Well, when I dig into the research, the fundamental differences right away are communication means or methods. In other words, the boomers may want to send an email, and Gen Z goes, "Would you IM me?" Or
Yeah.
me that message.
Yes,
So communication
that's so
styles.
true.
I think expectations are different. So I follow. Here's another acronym. It may be cheesy, but it's helpful to me. It's PERKS, PERKS. So letter P is, I think, even in interviews, we need to go to the letter P, which is preferences. I think it's good right up front to find out, let's say from a millennial or a Gen Zer that might be different than an Xer or Boomer. What are the preferences you hope to experience at this workplace? Now, preferences are, I wish for this, but it's not a demand. It's not a, doesn't have to be, but it's good to know for boss. Oh, 𝗙𝗢𝗟𝗦𝗪, I didn't know. I think we can make that happen. And you go, hallelujah. The letter E is expectations. That's stronger than preferences. I assume this is going to happen here. And here's something I say in the book that might be helpful to viewers and listeners. I think conflict expands based on the difference between expectations and reality. Think about that.
Wow.
It
Wow.
gets bigger so here's a good illustration. You'll appreciate this, I think.
Okay.
If I tell my wife I'm going to be home for dinner at 7 and I'm home at 10 after 7, it's not a big conversation. If I show up at 9:30, we have a big conversation.
Oh, big conversation.
Yes. And it's not because she cannot live without me for 2.5 hours. It's because I created an expectation. So I think in those early conversations, even the interview, talk about expectations. Gen Z is going to bring some expectations that you're wondering, did you get that from social media? Because I don't think that's real. And I'm not even putting anybody down. I'm not insulting them. They're just going to come in with some expectations. The letter R is requirements. That's the R in PERKS. So some of them are going to come in, not all, but some are going to come in saying, I think I require our company to do something for, whatever. It's whatever cause. And it might be that's when you want it to come up in the hiring process, because you can say, I'm so sorry, Josh, that's not going to happen here. So can I walk you to the door? We're going to help you find another, it's not going to happen here. And better now than 6 months in, and now they're called
Oh my gosh.
discord and division because you never talked about it, and they hid it. So you might remember in the book, I tell a fun story. If you don't mind, I'll tell it real quick.
Yeah.
So Antonio was a young employee. Remember this
I remember
story?
this.
Love this story.
Yes, I do. I love it.
So he's being
Love
interviewed,
this.
and the interview's going well, seems to share the values, brings a little experience. He's young, he's in his 20s, but he gets hired. If you remember, several weeks, I forget, maybe a couple months into the job, he shows up and he's got tattoos up and down his arm. Not the end of the world, except that one of the policies he heard about in the interview was no tattoos. It's off-putting to some of our older customers. We just would rather you not have any tattoos. So they have a little come to Jesus meeting, in the back room after the shift. And, Maggie says, Antonio, didn't you remember in the interview, you shouldn't have tattoos. Well, he gets offended. He takes it very personally. This is a part of my identity. You're cutting me down. You're triggering my PTSD, that sort of thing. And it's an unnecessary conversation because they didn't really dig deeper on demands or requirements. Well, if you remember, the end of the story is very good. They have a number of meetings. They finally decide, I don't want to lose Antonio. Maggie says, I don't want to lose this good worker, but we also can't just say the policy doesn't matter anymore. So they stand in front of the entire team. They talk about how they're going to meet in the middle. They're going to keep Antonio, but he's going to wear long sleeves, even in July. Sorry, and everybody gets standing ovation. Everybody goes, this is awesome. We don't want to lose this guy. Meantime, Maggie calls corporate and says, can we reconsider our tattoo policy? Maybe we look at that. But what I loved about Maggie is she valued the person, but she didn't compromise, but that would have been solved had they really clarified that in the job interview.
Yeah.
The letter K in perks is keys. This is something I learned from John Maxwell years and years ago when I was in my 20s. John taught us, find out the keys to their heart. What makes them tick, what makes them laugh, what makes them cry. And you can't go really deep in a job interview, but you want to find out, what does Carolina just love? Well, she loves Diet 7-Up. Oh, we're going to stock the fridge with Diet 7-Up just to welcome her to that sort of thing. So keys to their heart just helps them feel valued and loved. Can I say that? On the
Absolutely.
team, we care about you here. And then the S is predictable. It's salary. You're going to have to talk about compensation.
Oh, yeah.
And hopefully they'll know that already. But if they don't go any further till you say this pays this much. Is that okay? Anyway, just a simple little line of dialogue that I have found really helpful, particularly with other patients in the beginning. Yeah.
Absolutely. Wow.
I love that so much, especially these acronyms. It's easy to remember certain
Yes,
things,
it is.
but my notes, I'm going to have to go back to this. So let me follow up now with another question. You discuss also in your book about managing preferences, tensions, and expectations.
Yeah.
Can you tell us why these challenges are so important for our leaders today?
Ooh, I got a story on this one, Dr. Elmore.
Okay. I'll let you tell it first if you want to, and then I'll.
Okay. So when we're talking about tensions and expectations, it wasn't long ago, just a couple of weeks ago, I had a particular team member that decided that they just were done working for the day and decided to go home. Didn't tell a leader. Didn't say anything about what they were going to do.
Yeah.
They were actually an hour and a half into their shift. They left everything undone. The workloads gathered up, so other people had to do them. They walked away, checked out, clocked out, went home, whatever they did. Nobody knew it. And then we find out the following day when there's a no call, no show. And I'm like, there's nothing ever said. There was no conversation. How in the world, how do you communicate with this? I mean, how do you work with this?
Yeah.
Did that make sense?
Yeah, Steve, unfortunately, that's not an isolated experience. I'm talking to employers and managers all over the place. It's all over, not just the country, the world. So my explanation, I'm not going to excuse the behavior, but I want to explain the behavior.
Yes, please.
So first of all, young people, please forgive me. Young people come into the job obviously with very little experience. So they wouldn't have much professional experience to know, oh, I need to be responsible for at least finishing the project I'm on and then letting my employer give, 2 weeks notice and letting them know, I don't think this is going to work out. But what I wish in your situation, Steve, was we would have gone to someone and said, I'm not getting the help I need. Can we problem solve? Of course we can. But no chance for that if they're ghosting you, if they're just evaporating. So I'm sad that this is happening, but here's what I got from my Gen Z focus groups. This may not be a Gen Zer that you're talking about, but the young generation, remember 5 years ago when the pandemic broke out and layoffs happened, not just Gen Zers, but lots of layoffs happened. But Gen Z was just entering their careers and many of them got laid off. So when they walk away from a job like this employee did, they're often thinking, you didn't care for me. Why should I care about you? Now, again, I'm not excusing. They should be responsible, at least responsible for what they've been given. After all, you're giving them a paycheck. But I'm telling you, I talked to so many. In fact, one of the things that came up in the focus group with Gen Zers was, I said to this focus group, many of the Xers and boomers that listen to this are saying, we think Gen Z doesn't care because, no, I'm sorry, Gen Z doesn't work hard because they don't care. And one of the Gen Zers said, Dr. Elmore, can I be honest with you? Uh, we don't work hard because we think you don't care, meaning the employer. Now,
Really?
it's a whole nother angle, but at least it helps me be empathetic, even if I still say, that's not going to work here, Charlie, you know. So
Yeah.
I guess empathy is going to be a huge factor on whether we build a bridge instead of a wall between young and old. We've just got to be able to lean in and do the extra work that's required
Hmm.
to build this bridge instead of this wall that we naturally
Yeah.
put up. So,
I
And
love that.
yeah, and that can be so exhausting for an older leader like
yeah,
myself.
it's
Been
true.
around a while, and you're used to saying, you're used to getting the things done that you can get done through your
Yeah,
employees,
yeah,
but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of extra work to
yeah,
really
it is.
manage that.
And that's what I want to help listeners with right now. I am realizing that I need to listen a little bit more than I used to listen,
Yeah,
and I need to coach a little bit more than I used to coach.
yeah.
So it's more, and Steve, to your point, we don't want to do that all the time. I've already got
No.
a busy schedule.
Yeah.
So, Carolina, back to your question about tensions and expectations and preferences. This is something that I think leaders do well to understand. There are problems to be solved at work, and there are tensions to be managed. And the difference is a problem is something that pops up, and we all know, okay, we got to get rid of that thing. So let's
Yep.
put our heads together, solve the problem. Tensions don't go away. For
Right.
instance, I think if
That's
we're
right.
in at almost every workplace, there's going to be a little bit of a tension between sales and fulfillment. You know, the salespeople are selling like crazy, and fulfillment goes, "What are you selling over there?" You know, so
Mhm.
that's not going to go away. We're always going to have a little tension there, and the sooner we recognize that and say, "That's just nature of the beast. That's part of the territory," we do better. Because now I realize, almost like in a marriage, there's some tensions to manage in a marriage. Am I right about this? Let's
Oh
be
yeah.
so anyway, that would be what I would say there. That's my main answer. So there are expectations, like we talked about. There's problems and preferences, but I think that tension thing is the liberating point I'm trying to make here. Some things won't go away. You don't have bad people. You just have normal
Right.
problems that are going to happen in every workplace. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this question then, Dr. Elmore. As a leader, how can I better understand a particular generation? Because here's the thing, we tend to stereotype
Yeah.
them. We tend
Yeah.
to say they're all that way,
No,
right? And
that's
maybe they're not really all that way.
right.
So
Right.
how do I better understand the generations that I work with without really stereotyping them?
Great question. I'm going to do my best to give you a good answer. May not be a great answer. First and foremost, I think we have to recognize what a stereotype is. Isn't it a mental shortcut? It is. You know, it's like, I don't want to do the work to fully understand the 59 million Gen Zers or
Very
the
true.
80 million millennials. I want to take a shortcut. I hear one story and I lump them all into that stereotype, right? But isn't it
Mhm.
true? We don't want to be stereotyped. I don't want anybody, Steve, to say baby boomers
No.
were all dinosaurs. No, we're not. No, we're not. You know, so I think we can recognize I shouldn't do what I don't want done to me. Secondly, I think we need to work to not take one story, one anecdotal story, and throw everybody under the bus there. So I feel like I have been helped by telling myself the glass is still half full, not half empty. Meaning,
Yeah.
when I see differences in millennials or Gen Zers, I need to say that may be true, and I'll need to do a workaround there, or they'll need to do a workaround if I insist on it being my way. But meeting in the middle and believing they're bringing something to the table, oh my gosh, it's a game changer. That's why I like to say, tell me about your superpowers, Carolina. Tell me about your superpowers, Cam, who's part of Gen Z, and
Mhm.
it's so different than me. I just feel like we need to approach it that way. That's just positive relationships. That's beginning with belief, not suspicion. One of our images we love to use when we teach leadership is I've found that there's two kinds of leaders, quarterbacks and referees.
Wow.
So think about this. If you look
Yeah.
at football game. Referees are those people that are calling fouls, throwing flags, and telling people when they're out of bounds. Quarterbacks are moving the ball down the field, passing it off, handing it off, throwing it. We're going to score. I think I begin my career as a quarterback with lots of inspiration. As I age, referee, you're out of bounds.
Becoming the referee. Yeah.
That's
The
me.
carpet. Yes, I know.
That's me. I have to admit that's me.
Yeah, so
Hey.
I do well to hold that image in my head. I've got to be a quarterback, not a referee, even though I want to tell so-and-so they're out of bounds right now. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
But it's true because you start changing as time progresses as well. So I definitely understand what you're saying. And I love seeing your different perception on every angle, because it's so important to take that into consideration.
Yeah.
It definitely is. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, Carolina, we're going to go to a break real quick. But Dr. Emma, when we come back, I'm going to ask you a question that has to do with corporations. It's just something I have in my mind, okay? All right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Dr. Elmore just shared some great insights on managing the gap and better understanding each generation. So when we return, we'll discuss now how to bridge the gap in the workplace. Stay with us. We'll be right back on The Leader's Edge.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to The Leader's Edge. I'm Steele with my guest co-host, 𝗙𝗢𝗟𝗦𝗪, and featuring our special guest today, Dr. Tim Elmore. Dr. Elmore, we just discussed a couple of really amazing segments where we talked about mind the gap of the generations, the different generations, and you explained those. And now you talked about the contributions and managing the gap in the generations. And now we're going to get into a little bit different one called bridging that gap. So how are we as leaders, parents, teachers, how do we bridge those gaps with these particular generations? And I have a question for you that I just want to get out of the box really quick. Do you find, Dr. Elmore, that our companies, our major companies out there, do you find that they understand this, or are they struggling with it as well?
No, we're finding more and more people struggling with this. They're good people, even good leaders. But here's what happens. This is the behavioral science we need to understand. Our brains perceive that if someone is different, they're worse. I know
Yeah.
that's strong language, but when I
Yeah.
see something
No,
I
that's
don't
true.
understand, I go, "Oh, if you only knew what I knew, you'd get it here." Carolina, we were just talking about your son. If you
It's
only
true.
understood what I understand, son, you'd be better off. So we just need to recognize different isn't worse. In fact, it might be better if I listened a little bit. A 27-year-old might have an incredible idea to add, on where the future is going. So here's what I had to do. I had to make a list, and I'm going to share this list with you right now. I had to make a list of the central contributions of the builders, of the boomers, of the Xers, of the millennials and Gen Zers, because I'm prone to see the glass is half empty, or
Yep.
we're going to die. We are going to die, like that. Instead of realizing, no, we've been thinking kids are bad since Socrates. Did you know that? Socrates even said thousands of years ago, kids are disrespectful to their parents and they're not listening anymore. That could have been written last week. My gosh. So anyway, let me just share some with you. Think about it. The builders, even though they might be different than you listening right now, bring fierce loyalty and sage wisdom. When I talk to somebody that's 80, man, they've been around a block and they've seen good and bad. They've seen the economy go down and up, and they've been through hard times. So I just need to remember, I need to pull out the good. I need to begin with belief. Boomers, Steve, you and I bring stories and coaching, and
Yes.
we need to take advantage of the boomers and say, would you help coach Eric over here or Erica over here? And boy, she's just not quite sure what to do on this, but tell her what you learned back in 1999.
Yeah. Yeah.
Millennials, oh my gosh, Carolina, your generation, 80 million of you. And by the way, you're now the largest generation in the workforce. There's more of
Wow.
you than any of us. So all of you out there listening that are still mad at the millennials, you better listen. They're taking over the workplace. So, and I'm glad about that, Carolina. I think you guys bring so much hope and energy and confidence. You haven't lost it yet. I hope you never do, but you're still relatively young professionals. Some of you are midlife, but then, 30s. So I think we need to look, we need hope. And I think millennials bring that energy and hope. And then Gen Z, the ones we're kind of not understanding very well right now, those 20 somethings, they bring a hacker mindset
Oh,
and
yeah.
entrepreneurial spirit. So when I say hacker mindset, I don't just mean technology, although it does have to do with technology. They've learned to hack almost everything, meaning they get behind the system, find out how it works, and make it work for them. Man, I want my Gen Zers to do that on behalf of the organization. Find out how we can save money here, or figure out how this thing works, and et cetera. And then entrepreneurial spirit. I don't know if listeners know this, but 72% of high school students in America want to be an entrepreneur. 7 out of 10. Now, are they all going to succeed? Probably not. But just that predisposition they bring, I need to set up entrepreneurial zones in the office where they can feel like it's a startup, but we have an established company here. So that's the best of both worlds. We're not hoping to God we're going to make it this week. We think we will make it. And yet we got some startup feel to the whole thing over here. I think that's going to attract them and retain them because of that entrepreneurial zone that we can create. So I'll stop there, but that's the pluses to each generation I need to remember to focus on, not the minuses. Yeah.
I just quickly have to add something to that, especially after the pandemic. We've seen so much of those changes. Now that companies are returning back to work full time, it's changed. It's changed a lot. And you're absolutely right with what you said. And I think that's great that you incorporate that into your workplace and keep that in mind. Because
Yeah.
there's been many times that now I sometimes feel trapped and I'm like, wait a second, and this didn't happen before, but that's because we can't go back anymore. And what we experienced during the pandemic, that's it. We lived it and now we know different.
And
We
we're
can't
living
go
on
back.
that side. Carolina, that is a great insight that I hope everybody listening heard. We're not going to go back. Stop wishing for 2019 or 2018 or 2017. We're in a new normal, and we need to make the very most of it. And again, I'll go back to that quarterback thing. College quarterback takes the ball from the center. He drops back. He is looking all around. What do I need to do with this ball now? What's the defense doing? How much time on the clock? What's the score? How many yards do we have to? And you call an option play based on the reality in front of you right now.
Right.
That's what leaders need to do. And I think you just challenged us to do just that. Let's not complain. Let's adjust. Yeah. So.
Okay. So that's going to bring me to this question here then.
Okay.
So as a leader, how do I stay flexible without giving in to the company? You know what I'm saying? And how can I develop, but how can I be, I guess, lack of better words, more mature in that area?
Yeah.
So, I mean.
Yeah, I do talk about that in the book. I'm trying to give you a really short, easy to get answer for your listeners. Roger Parrott once said, there's two kinds of leaders, motorboat leaders and sailboat leaders. So motorboat leaders are, I see where I want to go. I'm turning the motor on. You know, he's just straight line to the goal. But you and I both know that rarely, we rarely go straight to the goal. We zigzag a little bit because the times change. Sailboat leader is, I'm having to adjust the sails with every wind current that comes along. Now I'm still getting to the destination. I'm not giving up on the sail on the trip, but I am adjusting. And that's what I think is hard for us, especially certain temperaments. Am I right about this? That go, that's not what I want to do. Well, that's what you have to do, Bob. You know, I'm so sorry, in order to make it. So I think number one, we need to get ready to make some adjustments, but that doesn't mean you give in on your core values. So I did a book a few years ago called The 8 Paradoxes of Great Leadership. What I talk about, one of the paradoxes is I think great leaders are both stubborn and open-minded. I'm going to say that again.
Love that.
Great leaders are both stubborn and open-minded. It is true, isn't it? In fact, I think you need both. You need to be stubborn about a few things. Those are your core values. That's the identity that you retain. That's who you would say, shoot me if you want me to change here, because I'm not going to change here. But I'm adjustable. I'm adaptable on every other thing in order to sell this product or this service or whatever I'm doing. So I think you got to choose what you're going to be stubborn on and make sure it's not everything. Yeah. And then just adapt, and know that you're not giving in. Yeah, I think that. And
I love that.
That was Maggie and Antonio. Remember?
I love
Maggie,
that. Absolutely.
We're not supposed to do tattoos here, but if you come up, you're going to be fine, and we're going to be fine, and we're going to see if we can still sell.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good.
I gotta get one good question in here. Not that the others haven't been good, but I really want to make sure that we could get to this one because I really want you to dive in on this one. So our mentor, John Maxwell, has said that managers treat everyone the same and leaders treat everyone differently. So can you dive deep on this chess versus checkers analogy and how it applies to leadership?
Yeah, so chess and checkers is one of the images we use. When I play checkers, all my pieces look alike, move alike. I treat them all alike. If I'm going to lead well, I'm going to read the person before I lead the person. And a bishop and a rook and a pawn and a knight, they're all going to be different. No one's better than the other, but I'm going to treat them different. But see, that requires more work. Think about those two games, chess and checkers. It takes longer to play chess than checkers.
Sure does.
And it's harder to play chess, darn it, than checkers. But if you do the work, I'm telling you, it pays off. So John's exactly right. And by the way, he did this with me. I started working for John 1983, almost right out of college. And John played chess with me. He saw what triggers I had. He saw what strengths I had. He knew how to motivate me. He knew what buttons to push. And he led me very well. I always tell people, you either died or you thrived under John.
Yeah.
And thankfully I thrived. Stayed with him for decades. And of course, we still have we're going to take a vacation together next week. It's going to be amazing. But
beautiful.
I'm saying John modeled this for me. He did the work. And I'm thinking the generations that are in front of me right now, it requires me to play chess. So a big perk for a boomer might be a corner office, a bonus, and a new title. Gen Z might say a bonus for me is, can I have more autonomy? Because that screams trust, that you trust me. And could you help me with my college debt? I mean, that, it may be too. Two different things, but I need to know what speaks love. So I actually call this the gift factor. I'm sorry I'm taking so long. I'll try to hustle. But in our house at Christmas time, we do a gift exchange. So we all draw names, and Uncle Joe and Mom and, whatever. We all get names and we all, you know, somebody has our name and we get names. We noticed very quickly when we started this gift exchange, some people are really good gift givers and some people are really rotten gift givers.
Very
Okay?
true.
You don't want my son to get your name. You want my wife to get your name. That's, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
I think we need to make our leadership like this. Our leadership should feel like a gift. They need to be able to say, Carolyn, she knows me. I can tell she knows what my love language. She knows what triggers me. She knows what to give me to make me the best version of me. And I think it needs to feel like Christmas and my leader just gave me a gift and I want to give my all because
I love that.
Yeah.
Love that so much. I am so sorry to cut you short, Dr. Elmore. That was so insightful. Thank you so much for today's incredible discussion. Before we wrap up, I just want to take a quick minute and let us know, please, what are you currently working on and how can our listeners connect with you after the show?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Well, I just finished a brand new book and it's focusing on Generation Z because that's where the trouble spot has been most often. A lot of bosses I talk to believe in them, but they just don't quite know how to lead them. So get this, here's the title. The title is The Future Begins with Z.
Oh,
Wow.
I love that.
I love that.
Yeah. And then the subtitle is 9 Strategies to Lead Generation Z as They Upset the Workplace. So it comes out this fall. I'm pretty excited. It's going to be a Maxwell
wait.
imprint, HarperCollins. So I'm really excited about that. And if people want to find it, they can go to timelmore.com and just well, actually, let me just get a free item that they can get, which is a precursor to the book, is a free ebook called "The Glasses Still Have Full." There's that phrase. So
Yes.
they can, if they go to timelmore.com, they can sign up for the free ebook and download 50 pages of here's how to hire them, here's how to retain them, here's how to
Wow.
inspire them. And it's absolutely free, so there's no cost, but it might be just helpful as people are maybe challenged by the new generation of team member that's coming in. So
Thank you so much for that information.
Thank you.
you betcha. My pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much. If you have a product, service, or rebranding launch, we'd love to help you promote it globally. Please reach out to our producer, Robert Ciolino, at robert.ciolino, that's CIOLINO, at voiceamerica.com for more information.
And next Thursday, Carolina on the Leader's Edge will be joined by John Golden, our new friend. He's going to be talking about authenticity, self-awareness, embracing vulnerability, and many other things. Don't miss it. Tune in next Thursday. And Dr. Elmore, once again, thank you so very much for joining us today.
It was great to be with you guys. It was a lot of fun. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Elmore. And to all of our listeners and friends, thank you so much because we wouldn't be here without you. We're so grateful to have you here and we're excited to connect with you. Until next time.